Something that potentially a lot of employers don't understand is there's actually 3 to 4 different agencies involved when you get started to run payroll. And each province potentially has different divisions of these agencies. The main agency, of course, is the Canadian Revenue Agency, WorkSafe BC, and another important one is your Employment Standards Act. So potentially one of the first things to decide when you decide to start running payroll is when are you going to pay your staff? And the top ones are bi-weekly, semi-monthly, weekly, or monthly. Bi-weekly, you'll end up with 26 pay periods within a year. The semi-monthly, you'll end up with 24 pay periods. And weekly usually is not something that most employers go with because it becomes a logistics nightmare to pay every Friday. And monthly is something that's only usually used for things like commission, because actually within our Employment Standards Act, you need to pay your staff twice a month. And those might be things that could be missed. And then you'll want to register with the Canadian Revenue Agency. Now, if you already pay GST, it's easy enough to open a payroll tax account. If you don't have a GST number, you can also reach out to the Canadian Revenue Agency and open up a business number and a payroll tax number. You can do it through the phone or through online. I'm also going to, and if there's any links that are required, they're not in the slides because a lot of the links would be long and they'd be too hard to copy down. So reach out to myself or the chamber and they can send you the links to any of these agencies after the slides. The other thing that some employers potentially forget to do, and that's gathering the correct information and understanding that there's forms each employee needs to fill out. These forms are called TD1. There's a federal and a provincial TD1, which basically has a few questions on it that help each employee to understand what tax bracket is the correct tax bracket for them. And then it allows you to set your systems to deduct the right amount of tax per employee. These forms will also give you valuable information that you need to know, and that's mailing address, social insurance number, and birth date. You can, at the same time, you could potentially also have an internal form if you wanted to do direct deposit or other emergency contacts and that type of thing. The next thing to decide once you get going with those few is how you're going to track all of this. And there's a lot of options out there. As a bookkeeper, I do strongly recommend potentially running it within your accounting software, just because then it's all in one place and it's easy to manage. There is external softwares out there that run payroll. You can also get online versions such as WagePoint or Rise. There is also external agencies such as ADP. They'll run everything for you. You send them the information and they set up the direct deposits and that type of thing. I don't recommend doing a manual system. There is the CRA auto-calculate, and a lot of owners potentially will go to that the first time. But the disadvantage to that is you can easily lose track of what taxes that you're holding back and that type of thing. Or there can be mistakes potentially within an Excel spreadsheet. So I do recommend going with a proper accounting software. And there is a cost to it, but at the end of the day, it will save you time, as well as potentially any errors that may have come up from lost data. and the lost data, and that would be within the deductions, because some payrolls can be quite basic if you're just running wages, but then there's also a lot of companies will have perks nowadays. It's important to understand which benefits potentially could have additional taxes. So if you have this within your accounting program, it's a lot easier to keep track of if there's tax benefits to medical plans, cars, gifts, that type of thing. These all can potentially become taxable benefits to your employees. And there is information on the CRA website as far as what is a taxable benefit to what is not a taxable benefit and how it plays. Now, for the taxes, your employees are deducted income tax, Canadian pension plan, and employment insurance off of their gross. And that is depending on, like I said, how they filled out their TD1 will determine their income tax. Depending on their age, sometimes sets their CPP, and EI, everyone pays that, except for owners of a business. Employers are responsible for their portion of tax are the Canadian pension plan. Now you match what your employee has paid in. And then with employment insurance, it is calculated at 1.4 times what your employee has paid in. So you will hold back taxes from your employee, plus your portion of taxes needs to be remitted to the government. And normally when you open up your account with CRA, you're responsible to remit your taxes on a monthly basis. And your payroll taxes are due on or before the 15th of the following month. And I strongly recommend potentially making sure each payday you have a separate bank account that you transfer those taxes into an account so that they're there ready for remittance, because CRA does not mess around when it comes to payroll taxes. These are funds that are your employees' income tax that and they're not. And so they're one of the most strict about. And I find that potentially employers can run into a lot of trouble when it comes to remitting this correctly. They potentially forget to do it on time. They don't have the proper cash flow. They avoid it, that type of thing. And it's something to know that with CRA, the penalties can be from $500 to $1,700 for missing a payroll tax date, and they're very strict about it being on time. And then your interest when you miss those can be up to 20%. And across the board, out of any of the taxes, those are the stiffest penalties that CRA does have. So it is important to make sure that you have a proper system set up, that you don't forget, and that you have the cash flow to remit these taxes to CRA at the right time. One of the last steps after you've had a year of tax deductions is to make sure that you remit your T4s. And like I said, if you were in an accounting program, most softwares will produce your T4 slips for you and take a lot of the pain out. And with the TD1s, you'll have all the proper information that they're produced seamlessly. Having a CRA online account, you can also upload T4s to CRA, and it keeps it quite simple and easy to track, sort of thing. T4s are always due before the last day of February. It's always nice, though, to try and get your T4s out to your employees before that time. And this is a big subject, so we're just going to maybe take a pause here and move into some questions on CRA and taxes. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for now and see if anyone has any questions on payroll taxes.
I have a question, and you might be covering this later, but you mentioned the 3 different organisations. So the CRA, WorkSafe BC, what was the third one again?
Employment Standard Act and...
So yeah. What's the difference between those 3 organisations, and what, like, are you going to cover what WorkSafe BC does?
Yeah, we're going to move into WorkSafe BC. We're going to touch briefly with the Employment Standards Act, and then actually we're going to end with one that that is a division of the CRA, and that's Service Canada as well. Yeah.
So then I have another question for you.
Sure.
So at the Chamber, it is Christine and I who do the payroll remittance. We have a policy that 2 people have to sign things off. So I post it and Christine approves it. Christine is our treasurer. I'm just curious, for businesses that if you go on vacation, how can you have someone step in and do your payroll remittance? Do you have any advice there?
If an owner goes away and they don't, I would advise that you can set up what is called bookkeeper access, and then the bookkeeper is able to file and remit the numbers correctly, set up the payment ready to go out, and then the owner would just have to basically approve. Now, if they're not able to approve, potentially they might want to set somebody up, like their accountant would have temporary access to approve if they're like going to be, you know, doing on a safari in Africa with no cell service or something like that. You do want to do it you do want to make sure that those things are in place if you're going to be an owner that is not able to jump on and make sure that taxes are paid on time, sort of thing. Yes.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. All right, we'll go back to sharing the screen then if there's no other questions. Thank you, Louise. So like Louise asked, we're going to move into WorkSafe BC. WorkSafe BC is another agency that you'll need to sign up for and register. And it's an important one. You can work along with them to really help for your employees to understand the prevention of injury in the workplace. They have some amazing stuff on their website that can be very helpful. And I mean, different industries absolutely have different criteria. When you think of safety at work, you think of potentially the construction industry, but I think also in offices, there's ergonomically correct stuff at desks and things like that, that the entire office could potentially look at as being, how do we do this so that we're all safe and healthy? And WorkSafe BC is definitely the agency to go to get information on this, because every employee has the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to refuse unsafe work places. So as an employer, I do recommend having a connection and a communication with your employees when it comes to the work environment. WorkSafe BC does have a fee to it. It is an insurance. When you register, you can register to be quarterly or you can register to be annually. I recommend quarterly if you are, if you have a large payroll. This just helps with cash flow if you're remitting 4 times a year. or once a year. Your rates are set by WorkSafe BC. So, of course, the higher the risk type of industry you're in is going to determine how high your premiums do become. You can also potentially budget by doing installments as well with WorkSafe BC. If you know, some companies who do quarterly also just do monthly installments, and it just helps with cash flow. So that's also something to consider when you do hire people, is what is your labor burden cost, like when you're potentially the cost of the taxes you pay for each employee, the price of what WCB costs you per employee, and then there's things that we're going to be touching on, and that is stats and vacation pay are all labor burden costs that need to be taken into account. So when you go as a business owner for the first time, hey, and I hire staff, and if I pay them $20 an hour, and it all works with my cash flow, you've got to remember the additional costs that are involved with running payroll, and that is your portion of taxes, your covering them with WorkSafe BC, as well as staying within the Employment Standards Act of covering stat pay and vacation pay. So there is a formula that I use with a lot of my clients, and it basically works out what their labor burden is per employee depending on what their hourly rate is. And it's a good exercise to make sure that you have within your cash flow and understand. And even when you're giving raises, what does that mean? You know, like, I mean, we all want to give love to our employees that are working hard, but you have to understand what that's actually truly costing you. The next one we're going to move on to is the Employment Standards Act. Now, this one you don't need to register for, and you don't pay into, and a lot of people potentially forget about it, but it is one of the most important to have a clear understanding of, and also potentially as an employer is to go over it and have some of the basic stuff within your employee handbook so that your employees have a clear understanding of when they're paid, how they're paid, you know, that type of thing. A lot of people can go, oh, well, my friend said, or my uncle said that I get paid, you know, 3 times for different coffee breaks, and there's a lot of gray area out there of misunderstandings. So I strongly recommend going to the Employment Standards Act's website, or even reaching out to them and calling them and having a few of the key points in your employee handbook and being very familiar with it. The Employment Standards Act covers things like minimum wage, hiring, hours of worked overtime, statutory holidays, vacation pay, leave, meal breaks, how many pay periods in a month, compensation if somebody leaves, that type of thing. We're going to touch base today just on a couple of the ones that I hear the most questions on and the most misunderstanding are, and that is our statutory holidays. I think a lot of employers don't potentially check out the employment standards. They don't check out the criteria, and they just go off of what they've heard from another business owner. So BC actually only has 10 legal stats within it. I believe the calendar has 11, but you don't actually have to legally pay out on all 11. There's this is the 2020 calendar here, and how statutory holidays are calculated is you go back 30 days from the stat, and if the employee worked 15 of those days, then they qualify. So if we take the next stat that's coming up, Victoria Day, we would go from April 18th to May 17th, and we would basically calculate, employee A, if they worked 15 days, then they would qualify to be paid for that stat. And then we would take the calculation of the average hours they've worked within those days. So if their average worked out to 5 hours a day, then that's what they're entitled to. They're not automatically entitled to 8 hours. So if their average doesn't, if they work an average of 7.5, then that's what they're entitled to. As an employer, by all means, employers can make the choice to pay what works for them, as long as they understand that what the criteria is, and also the employee understands that, if your employer is giving you 8 hours every stat and you're only averaging 6 hours, that they understand that they're actually getting extra from you, and there's a bit of a difference there. The other one that we'll touch base on is vacation pay. And this question has come up a lot, and that is, an employee is entitled to the 4% vacation pay after they've been employed for 5 calendar days. So if you've brought somebody aboard and they've only been with you for a short bit, and they don't work out, yes, they're entitled to that vacation pay after they've been with you for 5 calendar days. Within BC, you need to pay 4% of their wages. It needs to be paid out on an annual basis if it's not paid out more frequently. After 5 years, the rate will go up to 6%. And it's a good idea, if you choose to pay the vacation pay out on every paycheck, is that there is an agreement in place. And these are the kind of things that are in the Employment Standards Act that, like when I said, you need to have an employee handbook. And I know it seems like, if you're not a big company and you have only 2 or 3 staff, you're like, well, why do I need an employee handbook? Because this is the gray area where you don't want an employee feeling like they don't understand how it works. And so if it's in a booklet and they get it, and they understand that as an employer, you're paying out vacation pay on every check, and when they take 2 weeks off every year, that they need to save themselves for that time frame because there's not vacation. You haven't accrued vacation pay on their behalf. And this next one is slide that I have here is I threw in at the last minute because of everything that's going on. And this is Service Canada. They're a division of the Canadian government, but they're slightly different than CRA. And this is another agency as an employer you would like to register for. Before all of this, it was a broken system, and that is to have an online account with CRA. It took 10 business days to get a code to have the online account, or it took 10 business days to get a form mailed to you. And Service Canada, and this division is needed in order, it's the Service Canada is who operates the employment insurance benefits. So for some reason, if an employee leaves, you need to issue them an ROE within 5 days of termination. So with all of the things that have gone on with COVID-19, this site crashed numerous times trying to get all of those ROEs out to the employees. And even though you don't plan for staff to be leaving when you first start, I think it's a good idea to be ahead of the curve and set up your accounts so that if an employee leaves, you can issue their ROE within the proper time frame of the 5 days. And that brings us to the end of the slide, and we can move into some more questions. Here's my contact. If you would like any of the links to any of the agencies that I've referred to, you can also reach out to the Chamber as well for any of those links, because Louise or the girls will have the links to any of those sites. You're muted, Louise.
Thanks, Christine. That's really helpful. And we will have the presentation available afterwards if people want to rewatch for more of the information. I also just wanted to quickly comment that when you were talking about WorkSafe BC and the rights of employees to have work in a safe environment, there are quite a lot of guidelines out just now specific to COVID. So there's guidelines for retail shops, for construction, for farmers markets. And what's become quite apparent over the last few weeks to us, or even this week really, to be honest, is there's a lot of misinformation out there around who is able to operate businesses safely just now. So we're going to be doing a better job or increasing our efforts in sharing the facts around who can open and who can operate and what constitutes safe working. So I just wanted to add that in there and then open it out to any questions from anyone.
Well, that's, I guess, my point in that as a business owner and the first time taking on employees, or even if you have subcontractors, is not to be afraid of reaching out to these agencies and take the time needed to have that understanding and knowledge yourself, because at the end of the day, it is going to fall back on the business owner that they should have had that understanding. So reaching out to WCB and the Employment Standards Act to have the knowledge that you need to operate your business and employ people.
So I have another question then for you, Christine.
Sure.
At the moment, there is the 75% wage subsidy.
Yep.
And there's also the 10% subsidy on remittance for your payroll remittance. Is that a manual process for businesses to do, or do you have any insight on how that will work?
CRA, I'd have to say, has done an amazing job at setting a step-by-step questionnaire on their site with these programs. All of the COVID-19 programs that are out there, you can literally, once you get to the correct link, you can literally go step by step and get steered to the correct answers that you need. For the 10% and the 75%, the 10% is quite easy. It is just a calculation, and then you do the calculation of 10% of your income, of the wages, and there's a little bit of criteria as far as it doesn't exceed the income tax amount, and then you basically don't remit it as part of your payroll remittance. Contradicting myself from earlier, but COVID-19 we know is a completely different beast to what the norm is. The 75% is a lot more complicated, and there is criteria as potentially you need to have a 15% decline in revenue from the previous year, and they actually have a spreadsheet that you need to fill out for your salary. So you fill in, use their spreadsheet that they've uploaded, and it does the calculation and the formula for the 75%. C.Campbell is, we have a workflow in place and questionnaires out to all of our clients in order to help any of our clients file for the 75%, because some of it is, it is all brand new, and as employers, they're potentially hustling a ton right now, just trying to help their business survive. So this learning something new is kind of difficult. So we are helping any of our clients to apply for the 75% wage subsidy.
Yeah, we've applied for it. We've gone through the process, and the only advice I would say is make sure you have all your payroll information at hand so that you can fill in the information in the spreadsheet. Otherwise,
Yes, otherwise the website will time out on you. So yes, we have an extended Excel spreadsheet that puts all of that at our fingertips before we log in to get the application process started.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from anyone else in the audience? I am not hearing any questions. So, Christine, can you just repeat quite quickly what your contact details are again if people want to get in contact with you?
So people, I am listed on the Chamber's website, and I'd have to say, if there's no Chamber members out there in this audience, register with the Chamber, because before I had a website, that is how my clients found me. They would literally go Google bookkeeping and my Chamber listing would come up. So there's a little plug there for the Chamber, as well as they can find me on my website, and my email address is support@ccampbellagency.com, and you can email me if you have any direct questions. Feel free to also just give me a call. Happy to have a chat with anyone and do a free consultation on any of this.
Great, thanks. And Jen, I like to put you on the spot. Can you give an update on any of the upcoming sessions that the Chamber's doing?
Yes, so May 11th, we're having a roundtable with MP Patrick Wheeler, and that will be starting at 10 a.m. on May 11th. So tune in for that to get caught up on all of the federal updates. And then the next day on May 12th, we're also doing a session on how to sell to government. So we'll be joined by the ministry responsible for procurement and selling to government. So that's a really great one to check into, just to learn about. And if you have any friends in your network that would benefit from these webinars, please feel free to share the links with them as well and get them on board, because they're all free. So yeah.
Thanks, Jen. And then just to add a little update from the Chamber. So up until now, we've very much been in response mode, helping people access information. So to that end, we have a COVID dedicated web page. It's squamishchamber.com, and then you'll see it on the homepage. So there's lots of information and resources and webinars up there. But we're now shifting gears a little bit in terms of trying to help businesses, support businesses in their operations, support local businesses, and keep them in business. So we have another page on the website that is about supporting local businesses in different ways you can help, whether that's ordering online or just leaving them a review. There's many things you can do right now to help our businesses. So more information on that will follow. Thank you to everyone who attended today, and thank you very much to Christine Campbell from C.Campbell Agency for that insightful presentation this morning. So listen, we have any questions or any comments? I'm going to sign out and hope you all have a great and productive and safe day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.